Hey crochet friends, Kim from Stamping Imperfection. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I have 10 heat embossing techniques that I want to share with you. I've been working on this project for myself. This is a technique album that I'm creating. I purchased one of these photo albums that has the little sleeves in. You can slide the photos down inside. And so far I've added 34 techniques to this album. And what I've been doing is I cut white cardstock down to 4 by 6 inches. That's the size of the pockets. And then I do my technique on one side, and I have some printables that I created on the other side, and you can see all I had to do was cut it out and glue it on. So I've got 34 of these, and I have these available to you on my blog. I have printables, usually have 4 different techniques like that, and you print it out and you can just trim around the boxes or inside the boxes if you don't want the black lines, and then you can create your cards, do your technique, and file it in your book. So when you're done, you have this great book that you can flip through and you can look at the techniques that you have and remind yourself of some of those things. So too many times we do a technique and then we forget about it, and so I'm making myself a reference tool, and I think it's a great reference tool. So today I have 10 heat embossing techniques I want to share. Some of them are techniques, heat embossing techniques that I use in my card making. Some are heat embossing techniques that I use mostly for my scrapbooking. And then I have one new technique that I'm excited to share today that I just learned. It's a new to me technique. I don't know if it'll be new to you, but it was a new to me technique. So I'm excited about it because I have something I have never shared before. And that's technique number 10. So I hope it's new to you too, because it was like, heat embossing is a wow technique anyway, but when I saw this technique, I was like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. So it's kind of fun. Let's take a look at these techniques. And why don't you create your cards along with me? Grab those free instructional printables. You can add them to your cards and you can get your own technique album started today. It's a great resource to have for your craft room. It's been a while since I have heat embossed, and most of my embossing powder is pretty old, so I did decide to go ahead and order some new embossing powder. But there are a few things that you absolutely have to have if you want to do heat embossing. The first thing you need is a watermark stamp pad. It's like a glue stamp pad. It's actually almost like clear ink, but it's very sticky and it takes a while to dry, and it allows you to pour powders and things like that in, and then you can heat set and melt the powders. I believe the powders are actually small bits of plastic. I'm not 100% sure about that, but they do melt, and then when they melt, they actually then, as they cool, form a nice solid material, and it's so beautiful. And the first time you do it, it's a wow technique. So I use a Versamark watermark stamp pad, and I recommend buying a re-inker with it when you buy it, especially if you live in a humid area. I live in a humid area, and I find that I need to re-ink it more often than I used to. In fact, I may need to re-ink this before I do anything today. I didn't actually test this out. This is actually a new embossing pad. I haven't had it for too long. It looks pretty clean. Once you start embossing and doing projects, your ink pad will not stay creamy like this. It will actually get pretty dirty, and that's okay. It will not affect your stuff at all. So you need a watermark ink pad. And the next thing you need is a heat tool. So I just treated myself to a new heat tool. I've had my heat tool for a really long time, and pieces are missing from it, and I decided I deserved a new heat tool. So I bought the Stampin' Up! Heat tool, and this is a nice heat tool. It's got a couple different settings. It's got a low and high setting, which is nice for different techniques. Like if you like to do, you know, like some mixed media techniques, sometimes you need low heat with some of the materials that you're using it on. And you also need to have an outlet near your craft table. That's another thing too. I probably should have paid more attention to where the closest outlet was here. But this is a nice one. It's got a little stand that you can stand this up on. The end does get really hot, but they've got this plastic cover over it now. I mean, the heat tool I have doesn't have this, so if you accidentally touch the end of that, it's super hot. So it's good to get a new one when, you know, when new stuff comes out, it actually is, you know, it has safety features. So that's a good thing. I do recommend when you're done using this that you unplug it. And if you leave it unattended, make sure that you don't have anything near the nozzle end, because you could actually potentially, you know, have a fire or something if you weren't careful. But I do recommend unplugging this when you're done using it, and you know, when you go to bed or leave the room, I like to have it unplugged. Safety first. So a good heat tool, and a blow dryer does not work, mostly because it makes a mess of the powder, but also they don't heat the same way this does, so that's nice. The third thing you need to have is some embossing powder, and Stampin' Up! Has two different sets of embossing powder. The one that I recommend getting, if you're only going to get one, is to get the Basics Wow embossing powder, and this one is called the Metallics. So they have the Basics and the Metallics. I recommend the Basics. There are a lot of things you can do with this, and a lot of techniques and things you can do. So it comes with a container of primary ebony or black, and opaque bright white, regular white, and then it comes with clear gloss. The clear gloss is your best friend. Like if you want to learn to watercolor, you can start pretty easily using the clear gloss, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So that would be the one I recommend, the basic set, black, white, clear. If those are the only three you have, you can do all kinds of stuff. If you want to treat yourself, definitely go with the metallics after you've practiced with the basics. And, you know, especially at holiday time, I think there's something really fabulous about a metallic embossed sentiment, or you know, a beautiful metallic image on black cardstock. Like it's just a stunning thing to do, you know. And you might want to add a little metallic touch to your Christmas cards. So this has polished silver, it's got metallic gold, rich, and metallic copper. So these are all really fun. And according to Wow, you should actually leave your embossing powders in containers, in the containers they come in. Embossing powder is very staticky, and if you put it in another container, like they actually use the static properties to get it in the container, and if you put it in other containers, it loses some of that. So it can affect your embossing. So they say to leave it right in these containers. Now, that being said, I have two bins this size, and this is Stampin' Up! White embossing powder, and then I have another one this size that has Stampin' Up! Clear embossing powder, because I do emboss a lot. I haven't embossed a lot lately, but I do a lot of embossing. I love this technique. And many years ago, Stampin' Up! Was they put all their embossing powders on the clearance rack, and it was so inexpensive. I bought like 10 containers, and the containers were a little bit bigger than this actually, and I poured 10 containers in here, and it's lasted me for years, like absolutely years. I'm pretty sure I've refilled this one. My clear one looks like this too, and I find that I emboss more with my embossing powder like this, because I can just, you know, put the powder on over the container. It's a less messy, and I just really like it. Now, this has worked for me because I've done a couple things. Embossing powder doesn't last forever, but this is in one of those airtight containers. Like, this is super airtight. There's no way humidity is getting into this container. As soon as I'm done using it, I put the lid back on, and I store it in a cabinet. I do not store it in sunlight. I don't store it you know, next to a cabinet with a heater near it. So I'm careful about where I store it, because I think that can affect your embossing powder also. Because if you have old embossing powder and you find that it's not working as well as you want, it's probably just too old. It does have a shelf life, but I'm telling you, I've been storing it like this. I don't know what these are Store All Solutions containers, and they have worked amazingly well. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Wow does recommend that you pour the leftover back into the container that it came in. Okay, so that is that. So these are the materials you need. Of course, you need paper and stamps and things like that. So let me just show you the first technique. So I'm going to use this card, and I usually put like my technique on one side of the card, and then I have my printable set up, so all you have to do is cut out the instructions, and then you can put the instructions on the other side of the card. And it doesn't matter whether you do it on the left or the right. I probably have, yep, see, I have some on, you know, both sides. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. Like, I'm not fussy about that. If you're fussy about those kinds of details, because you like it to look perfect and professional, then you worry about those details. I will not be worrying about them. Okay, I think I'm going to start with black embossing powder, just because I think it'll be easier to see. Now, Stampin' Up! Used to have colors of embossing powder to match the colors of their ink. It was lovely. Let me just tell you, it was absolutely lovely. I actually treated myself to something else. Stampin' Up! Has an Embossing Editions toolkit, which I did not know they had. This was not pictured in the catalog, and I did not see this on the website. I don't know, it took me a long time, and I was excited about this because these are useful tools to have. It's got 4 things in this kit. It's got a powder pail. So this is what I was most excited about. And it also has an embossing buddy. And that is a little bag. It's like a powder bag. And I'm going to be very gentle with that because I'm super allergic to powder. Actually, attach a little clip here to mine so I don't have to touch it. And I'll be careful so I don't puff powder up. I don't want to inhale it either. So it also comes with a brush. This is nice. And it comes with a pair of ceramic tweezers. Now, ceramic does get hot when you heat it, so you want to be careful with that. Oh, these are nice reverse tweezers. These are really nice tweezers. All right. Very excited about this. So, let me show you how to use these tools. Alright, so I'm going to start with, I'll put these aside for just a minute, and I'm going to start with my powder pail here. And you want to just take your powder pail, hopefully you can touch it, and just lightly rub it on the paper. You don't have to bang it up and down on the paper, just lightly rub it on the paper. That's going to remove the static from the paper. Okay, then I'm going to do my stamping. Now I often forget to do the powder pail thing, like especially because I'm allergic to it, so you know. So I'm inking it up with the Versamark watermark ink. This is a clear ink, and I know it looks like I'm doing nothing, but I can see where I'm stamping. So up close you can see this, and I'll bring this up here, but I still don't think you're going to be able to see it. I don't know if you can see that at all, a little bit, but now here's where the magic starts to happen. And I'm just going to run this along the inside of this. Now I'm going to put my paper down on top here, and then I'm going to open up my embossing powder. And I'm going to pour my embossing powder over the top of the snowflakes I just stamped. And I can shake it off. I'm going to add a little more to this guy. Okay. I usually just give a couple gentle flicks to the back. Now on the front, the brush is for any stray embossing powder that you have. You just use this brush, just like that. And then you can unscrew this and just tap your powder back in. It's so neat and tidy, like so much neater and tidier than using a piece of paper. So I like to close up my container and return my embossing powder to the container and make sure it's all enclosed before I start heat embossing. Okay, the next step, and the tweezers are to hold your paper so you don't have to get your fingers in there. So the next thing I like to do is I like to warm up my heat tool just a little bit. So I'll turn this on and just give it a couple minutes to warm up. And I usually start from the back a little bit just to warm up the paper. And then I'll bring it to the front. And I hold it a few, 2 or 3 inches away, and you'll see all of a sudden it starts to change. You see that happening? The powder melts and gets shiny. Just like that. Now you don't want to overheat it. And I do my heat embossing on high, and then you want to be careful. Remember not to touch those ceramic tips. Those are going to be hot. I'm going to put that right in here so I don't touch it. And I'm going to actually store my powder pail in there as well. Now when you first get the heat tool, it's kind of stinky. So you can see how shiny and beautiful that is. It adds so much to your projects when you do this. Imagine this done on black cardstock. It's very beautiful. Like, it's very pretty. So this is a beautiful technique. So that's technique number 1. That's the basics of heat embossing. For the second technique, I'm going to pull out my stamp positioner. And for this technique, I'm going to place my paper up here at the top, and I'm just going to place my my stamp right there and pick it up just like that. So this one I like to have a stamp positioner to do, so this makes it easier, but I just wanted to show you this because it is nice and easy to do. I'm going to just use my Stampin' Buddy powder tool. Then I'm going to go ahead and ink up my stamp with colored ink. So I'm using Pool Party in this case, just because it makes pretty snowflakes. And then I'm going to stamp this. And I'm just going to take a rag and clean off my stamp. You can spritz it with water if you want to. Actually, I might do that since my Versamark ink pad is actually pretty new. Let's see if I can keep it clean a little bit longer. This is how it gets dirty. This technique is how your Versamark gets dirty. So now I'm going to ink this up with Versamark ink. I'm going to stamp it a second time. Then I'm going to put it in my powder pail. And I'm going to pour some clear embossing powder. This is the clear gloss. If you want to do more snowflakes, you can, but you'll want to do these one at a time. And then you do one with both powder, the ink, and then the Versamark, and then the powder, and then move on to the next one. So I've got this all set. So now I can go ahead and heat it a little bit from the back. Just to warm up the paper. And then I'm going to flip this over and heat it from the front. And you can see it start to turn there. It's getting darker and shinier. And there's that. Now you don't want to heat it too long because you'll lose the gloss on it. It'll actually melt the powder into the paper. And there you go. So if you stamp with colored ink first and then the Versamark ink and clear embossing powder, it looks like you used colored embossing powder. So this is like faux colored embossing powder. So you can have any color of stamped image you want and use the clear. The trick is you do need to have a stamp positioner to do that. Like that is a requirement. But it's a pretty technique. If you're using a big stamp, it's worth the effort. I'm going to pull out Pool Party ink. I've created some word die cuts here, like this, and I'm going to bring out those. I'm going to bring out the tweezers here, and I'm going to use this to show you something called the faux enamel technique. I love this. This is a technique I love for scrapbooking. And I'm going to use my old crappy reverse tweezers that I've had forever, and I'm just going to put this in. Now I went ahead and die cut this out earlier, and I die cut out two of them and glued them together. So there are two die cuts here glued together. Let me see if I can make sure I have all this parts covered. Okay, so that's that. I've inked it up, so I've got a nice color on there. Let's see if I can get that a little bottom edge to the Y. There we go. So that's a pretty color. Now if I had cut this out in colored cardstock, I could have skipped that step. But now I'm going to take this, and I'm not bothering with the powder bag. I'm pouring on, I'm using the clear gloss. And I'm going to put the clear gloss on, and this time I'm going to pick it up with my silicone tweezers. And I'm just going to move this tray out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. Okay, now I'm going to take this over to my Versamark, and I'm going to put this in my Versamark. And I'm re-inking it with my Versamark. Now I'll take this over to the clear embossing powder and just kind of dip it in the clear embossing powder. I'm going to do this part a couple more times. Those are actually very thick. I have to get used to using those. And I'll put this aside so I don't accidentally heat all of that up. I'm going to heat it again. And I want you to look at what this looks like. Look how beautiful that is. Now you can actually put another layer on there, and when it cools, actually it's not too bad, when it cools you can feel how thick it is, and the more layers you put on this, the thicker and thicker it gets. I'm going to do another layer just to show you what I mean. So I'm going to re-ink this in the Versamark. I didn't put the Versamark on the first time because that ink was pretty wet on there. And when I put the Pool Party ink on, and I really didn't want to get that Pool Party ink on my Versamark ink. So now I've got that Versamark ink on there. I'm going to go ahead and dunk this in that pile of clear that I have here. Try to make sure I get all the parts here. And I'm going to put this down on my glass mat, and you can use a metal sheet, like an old cookie sheet or something like that. If you have a small metal tray, it works great. So you can do as many layers of that as you want. And it's still a little wet, so I'm going to give it a minute to cool before I pick it up. And there you go. Can you see how gorgeous that is? Ugh. And it's getting thicker as you do it. Now there's some Wow embossing powder, it's called Ultra Thick, that you can actually purchase to do this with, and it's very nice. But you just really, the clear is, it's hard, that stuff is hard to find, and Stampin' Up! Does not carry that. And I find that the clear works just fine. And the Ultra Quick seems to have a different shelf life than regular clear embossing powder. So I've always just used this, but there is that other stuff available. So, oh, I love this. Love, love, love. This is a way to make gorgeous enamel, faux enamel like titles for your scrapbook pages. And imagine that in hello on a card. And don't you love the variegation in the color of that also? I love that effect. So I just think it's really pretty. So that's technique number 3. All right, so another fun technique is faux metallic embellishments. So imagine, let's say I hadn't cut out a sentiment. You could do this with a flower. Maybe you have you know, I don't know, a hammer or something, like you're making a masculine card and you have a hammer die and you cut out the hammer and you want to make it look like, you know, it's made of metal. This is a great way to do faux metallic. So I just inked this up in Versamark. I'm going to use this copper. I haven't tried this color yet. I haven't tried any of these colors, but I've used white, clear, black, silver, gold. I don't know if I've ever had a nice copper. Okay. And again, I'm just going to heat this up. There we go. Now you could ink this up again and do a second layer of this. But you can see you get these really nice metallic looking little pieces. So, you know, there's so many things that you might want to give a metal look to. This is the perfect way to do it. But this time, I only want to do part of the word. Okay. First of all, that's a technique all by itself, just inking up part of the word, and you can mask it off and make that actually easier to do. You know, so if you just mask part of the word, you'll get, like, I actually did a pretty tidy job there. Okay, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to use the Versamark on the top half of the letters. That feels really dry on that side. Let's see if we can do it here. Just like that. Ooh, put that down. So I've got Versamark on the part that I dipped, and I'm going to take that clear embossing powder again. Now I could have, if I had started with colored cardstock, I could have just done the Versamark on, you know, one half of the letters. I could have skipped the coloring step. But that's okay because you can see that if you don't have too many ink pads, you can use what you have this way too. If you don't have any colored cardstock, or if you don't have the colored cardstock that you want, you can use your inks to do the same thing. I would just dip the top part of the word in the clear embossing powder, and that would be that. Now I'm going to take the bottom part of this word and dip it in the clear embossing powder. I've got the embossing ink on there, and I'm going to take my white embossing powder and I'm going to use my brush here to actually make this a nice, neat, tidy line. Although I don't mind a little, for this particular technique, I don't mind getting a little white in the top part because that can make it look really fun also. So now you can see that you can create a really fun, like, dipped effect. And you can do all, like, this would be kind of a fun thing on maybe a water or beach card, or even a snowy day card. Imagine the word snow with blue on top and white on the bottom. It would be super fun. Very fun. I've got one more I want to show you. And this time, all right, so here's another fun thing. I think this is a really fun holiday, and it looks like it's dipped in gold. So I call this faux gold dip. And I don't even know if I'm getting, yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so this time I'm just going to use my gold embossing powder. There we go. You could do this in whatever color paper you wanted. I just happen to have a bunch of white scrap around. Isn't that pretty? Like, that's a faux gold dip. So pretty. And it's pretty on your Christmas card. So if you're looking for some fun technique, imagine the word merry or happy dipped like that. I'm going to use this nice Changing Leaves stamp here, and I'm going to use this one. Let me grab that. Now I'm going to use the powder bag here. And I'm going to go ahead and ink this up in my Versamark. This is called the Emboss Resist technique. So I'm going to stamp this in my Versamark, just like this. Then I'm going to put it in my powder pail, and I'm going to grab my clear gloss again, keep this. So there's that. I'm just going to ink blend over the top. Just like this. Now that clear embossing powder will actually resist. And I'm going to pull out some real red. I'm not doing my best blending work here, but you get the idea. I've already done blending on other videos. So I'm just blending my colors together, trying to get some of the orange in there. There we go. And then take a paper towel, or I always have microfiber cloths on my desk, and then buff up that clear embossing powder, and you're basically removing the ink from the clear embossing powder because the ink does not soak into the embossing powder. Isn't that pretty? Yeah. So I'm just going to take a little piece of black, and I want to show you how beautiful this looks on black cardstock. Like, this is such a perfect Christmas technique. Such a perfect thing to use around the holidays. Leaves done in gold gold or copper on black are just beautiful. Isn't that gorgeous? I think that's absolutely gorgeous. I love it. It's just one of those, just wow. It's a very elegant look. Every time you see it, you will say, oh, that's stunning. That's so elegant. Like those are the words that will come out your mouth. I promise. So these are like, I showed you some basic embossing today. Like this I would consider basic embossing. And then I showed you a couple of more advanced things. Okay, so basic embossing. All right, I'm going to bring a leaf out for the next technique. And I'm going to grab a piece of cardstock here. And I'm going to add 3 or 4 colors. Let me add some crushed curry, some orange, and some red. So I'm just going to ink blend these on. All right, so that's good enough. I just want to get some color on. Now, I'm going to dry this with my heat tool. Okay, so I made sure that was really dry. Now I'm going to pull out a leaf stamp. This is a pretty one. Let's do this one. I'm going to stamp this in Versamark ink. Okay. Then I'm going to use some clear embossing powder. I'll heat set this. Okay, and now I want to try, let's see, I'm pretty sure I have, yes, I'd like to try a brown. Let's try pecan pie and see how this works. This might not be dark enough. Usually I do black. Like usually this technique calls for a black background, but let's see how this works. And I guess I would probably also use a solid stamp instead of an outline stamp like this, but you'll get the idea with the outline stamp. So this is an emboss resist technique, but I did my ink blending in colors first, and then stamped my image in the Versamark ink. Now I'm buffing the color, or the brown ink that's just sitting on top of that clear embossing powder, and you can see the colors. Isn't that pretty? It's such a pretty way to get a fun effect. Like you could do a whole bunch of different colors, stamp a bunch of different flowers, and then if you ink blend black around it, you get this beautiful, colorful, floral bouquet, and you have a really dark background, and it's super stunning. It's a very pretty technique. I chose to do some fall colors here and do it with a leaf, and it's almost like, how did you do that type technique, and do it with a leaf, and it's almost like, how did you do that type technique. I just learned this technique at a Stampin' Up! Virtual event that I got invited to, so I wanted to share this. So this is glimmer paper. It's glitter paper. It's literally covered with glitter. It's super fun to add a little bit of this to your project. And I just found a package, in fact, about 3 weeks ago, and right after I found it, I saw this technique at this virtual event. So I'm going to stamp this in Versamark. I'm going to ink it up really well. I've never tried this before, so I hope it does actually work. And I'm going to stamp this onto the glitter paper. Then I'm going to remember where I stamped it, because there's no way I could ever imagine seeing this. And I'm going to use white embossing powder. Well, look at that. It's showing. I'm going to heat set it. Oh gosh, that actually did work, and it looks like a Christmas tree. And if you're ever not sure if you've gotten everything, just run your finger over it and you'll know if it's not embossed yet, because it'll feel like powder instead of shiny, although it all just feels like glitter paper on this. Isn't that cool? Who knew you could actually do this on glitter paper? Super fun. All right, technique number 10. Finally, I got through all 10 of those. I'm super excited about it. Now, I wanted to share the finished techniques, and I remind you that you can print. There are 3 pages. There will be 3 sheets that you can print on my blog at stampingimperfection.com. Check under the Techniques tab at the top of the blog, and you will find the written techniques for the heat embossing. That's normal heat embossing. I did the silver snowflakes. Then I showed you the faux color heat embossing. And then I showed you the black magic technique. And the other thing I want to add here is another thing that you can do that's also called black magic is, besides doing like the gold or the metallic that's really beautiful on black, if you get colored embossing powder, some colors work really well on black, some just fade into the black. So you have to experiment with the colors of embossing powder. But if you do, like I've done some floral cards with bright embossing powder, like bright pinks, bright teals, bright yellows, and they are just stunning on the black cardstock. And I've always called that technique black magic, because that's what I was taught. I did some emboss resist techniques, and here's instead of the leaf one that I did on the video, I have a snowflake one that I did, and I really loved that one. Now I showed you the Jacob's coat technique, and actually the colors are showing up better here. I was a little disappointed as I was editing the video, realizing that the colors weren't showing on the video quite as well as they should. Usually I always do this technique with black ink around it with beautiful florals, but I kind of wanted to see how it would come out with the fall effect, and I would use a solid stamp, not an outline stamp, because then this whole thing would be orange, this whole thing would be yellow, this whole thing would be green here, and it's a very bold look. If you do this in florals with bright colors blended behind and then you go over it in black, it's a stunner of a technique. I saw one today on the demonstrator Facebook group from Stampin' Up, and the woman did black ink, and she did Granny Apple Green under her, they were Christmas leaves of some sort. I can't even remember what it was. It might have been ivy or something. It was stunning, friends, stunning. Play with that. You can do these in, I mean, you can do any color dark ink background you want. You just need to cover up the ink blending that you did. You don't want those other colors to show anywhere but underneath that embossed image. Then I did all of the sentiment things. I love this. I've used these on cards, and I've used these on in my scrapbooks, and I love it. I did the faux enamel, I did the faux metal, I did the dipped enamel effect. Now for these, like the faux enamel and the dipped enamel, start with colored cardstock. Start with a color of cardstock you want that top to be, and you're just embossing that in clear ink so the color shows through, and then the bottom in the white. And the same with the gold. Like imagine that if I had had this die cut out in black with that gold dipped bottom, oh, beautiful. Or imagine maybe navy blue dipped in silver. Like that would be very pretty during the holiday season as well. And then my final technique is you can heat emboss on glimmer paper. I did not know this. And look at the effect, and imagine that on a holiday card. It's beautiful. Now you can actually heat emboss on a lot of specialty papers. You can heat emboss on acetate. You can heat emboss on vellum. But the secret to using acetate and vellum is that you have to get heat resistant acetate and heat resistant vellum. Look, you have to get heat resistant acetate and heat resistant vellum. And you also need to use your heat tool on low for both of those things. If you just use regular acetate and regular vellum, it's actually just going to melt the acetate and the vellum. So you want to be careful while you're doing that, and use your heat tool on low and keep it moving the whole time. Just keep it moving. So I hope you enjoyed these techniques. I think embossing is the gateway technique that really gets people hooked on stamping because it's beautiful. And I just did 10 different things here to show you a variety of things, and there's so many more things I could show you. And like the Emboss Resist, you can do this with watercolor, you can do it with all kinds of different materials. It's amazing. So I hope you like this, friends, and I hope you enjoy the freebies, and I hope you start making a technique album with all of the printables I have there. I'm up to 34, and I'm going to fill this album, and I'm going to fill a second one too. I have a whole list of techniques I still want to share. So I hope you find this helpful, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a really long video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and share with your friends so they can learn these techniques too if they don't already know them. And also, I would love if you subscribed if you're not already subscribed. And remember, if you need Stampin' Up! Supplies, check in my online store at stampwithkim.net. Thank you so much for watching, friends. I hope you find time to be creative today.